Hello and welcome to another video. I'm Natasha and I love to use mixed media artwork as a way of praying, and today I am using my A6 art journal, and I've started off by grabbing some water soluble pencils. These are Inktense pencils, and I'm journaling my thoughts. And I'm journaling about a specific situation which is currently going on in my life, where things haven't quite gone to plan and things felt for a little while a little bit stormy. But I was reminded as I was journaling this of a story in the Bible, or two stories in the Bible, where storms occur with Jesus and his friends. And so I was going to talk a little bit more about that, but yeah, I just started by adding some words and prayers to God using these water-soluble pencils. And then once I'd done that, I grabbed my gesso, which is like an acrylic primer, and used this tool to go over the top of the words. And as I was doing that, it was smearing the words and adding a little bit of colour, which I didn't mind. I kind of wanted to get those words covered up. Then the next thing I do is grab a water spray bottle and spray that all over my page, and then get some of my acrylic inks in blue stormy colours and add those to the page. So I'm using a Liquitex muted turquoise, and then I've added a De La Rooney Payne's Grey, which is one of my favourite colours, and I also have a turquoise and marine blue as well, which I later add. And as I was adding these paints to the page, I was reflecting on the two stories I mentioned at the start. And these stories were probably ones that are quite familiar. They're Matthew 8:23-27, where Jesus falls asleep in the middle of a storm and his disciples are terrified and wake him up and say, are you not concerned that we're going to die? Why are you not helping? And then the second one is Matthew 14:22-33, where once again we find the disciples are in the middle of a storm, only this time they're not scared. Jesus isn't with them, but they then spot Jesus from across the water, and Jesus walks towards them. And they're actually more scared of the figure walking towards them than they are of the storm. And they eventually realise it's Jesus, and he calls Peter out onto the water. And what really fascinates me about these two stories is in both stories, the disciples are in a storm. And the disciples would have been used to storms, at least some of them would, as they were fishermen. Yet in the first account, we hear how terrified they are. But in the second account, that's not mentioned at all. And it just got me thinking. I've always been fascinated by these two stories, and the idea of why were they not scared in the second one? Jesus wasn't with them, but they no longer felt scared, and it just made me reflect on why that could possibly be. So I've then grabbed out some collage materials that I think I might like to add to the page. So there's some handmade papers and a photograph of somebody in a boat, and so I start to place those on the page and stick them down. And going back to the two stories and this idea that something has changed between the first storm and the second storm. And of course, if we were to read in between those two accounts, we'd see that the disciples had been with Jesus, they'd heard him speak, they'd heard him teach, they had seen some of the incredible miracles that he'd done, and they would have known that they were safe. That even though Jesus might not have been physically in the boat with them, they no longer feared the storm. because they knew who Jesus was and who Jesus is. And it just made me reflect on the situation I mentioned at the start, a situation in my life, because I've been here before. I've been in this exact same situation with the similar thing happening, and the first time it happened, I reacted like the disciples did, with worry and with anxiety and struggling to figure out how to get through. And I realised that this time round, I didn't react in quite the same way. I was a little bit annoyed, a bit upset, but I didn't have the same worry or anxiety. And it just made me reflect a little bit on why that might be, and the fact that this time round, I have seen God's work in my life. In the last few years, I've seen his work in my life. I've seen evidence of his love and his faithfulness. And so even though things haven't worked out as I might have expected, I don't need to worry or panic or fear, because I know that Jesus is with me, and that Jesus is with me in the storm, and that he's always with me in the storm. And so I don't need to worry. And now I'm just adding a little bit more paint to the page. So I'm using this golden turquoise teal colour, which is one of my favourite colours, and just using my finger to add that paint to the page to give the impression of waves and of the sea, and just to add a little bit more texture to the page. So then off camera, I have cut out my little person from the boat, and I've also found some words. So I found some words from a mixture of places. God is with me in the storm, and I've found those in various magazines, and I couldn't find the word storm anywhere, so I decided to just use individual letters, and I think it gives quite a nice effect on the page. And then I grabbed my silver Liquitex acrylic ink and add a silver rainbow over this page. And as I was doing this, I was just thinking about that idea of God being with us, and being in the protection of God even in the middle of a storm. And I quite liked how I ended up almost sort of with 3 strands of the rainbow, representing Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer, Father, Son and Holy Spirit. And then I get my white acrylic ink and again just add some of that into the corners of the page to add some more detail, again to make it look like waves, like you're in the middle of a storm. And then finally I get some on a paintbrush and add some splatters, which is one of my favourite things to do at the end of a painting. To add some paint splatters to it just gives a really nice finishing effect. So there we have it, the completed page. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and do let me know in the comments if you have a go at doing your own. Until next time, goodbye.